Welcome back to the Untold. Today is going to be a very interesting episode.
Very interesting episode.
I don't know. Our guest has an incredible resume.
Yes, so many accolades, and it's all about agriculture, food,
and
the
the
cultural
journey.
experience, the journey she's had. So many countries, so many cultures she experienced.
Asian cultures mostly.
Asian cultures.
And I don't even want to say, honestly, we should just,
introduce our guest.
and start with the interview because we don't want to,
waste
ruin.
any time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's start.
Let's roll. We're back on the Untold, being joined by our very special guest, Dr. Dalal AlGhawas. Welcome on the show.
Welcome on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I think for a woman with so many accolades and the educational journey you've taken, it's only fair to start from the beginning and tell us how did it start, why you chose the field you've chosen, and I can't even name your field really. It's so many things.
But
it is all about
agri-food,
agribusiness,
consult. Right? I mean, consultant. What does that even mean?
Yeah, let's start there and why you chose it, and we go on the journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's really a
welcome.
pleasure to be able to share my story. Even for me, it takes time to also explain the work that I do because
We have the time.
Because it was a journey, right, to
Yeah.
get to that state. But let's go let's rewind a bit back to really
After high school, what happened?
exactly.
So you graduated high school,
Yeah.
and then
Okay, so I graduated high school, and like every typical, let's say, Asian person or Kuwaiti person, your parents always want you to pursue medicine, right? Or
engineering.
law, or
Yeah,
engineering, or
yeah.
law school.
Law school.
So I went down that path of, let's say, medical sciences.
Medical sciences.
As an initial start. But
Okay.
I know deep down inside, I always had that interest for food, agriculture. This was also inspired by my father, who's a soil scientist,
Oh.
and also a good cook and chef at home.
Nice.
So, there was always that initial interest, like in the back burner, I would
But
say.
you would say it's the family pushing you towards medicine? If there was no push at all, would you have entered medicine?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. But of course, at that time, we had very limited choices in
Right,
terms
right.
of the subjects, also in terms of the, let's say, schools that we could attend to and also receive scholarships for. So, alhamdulillah, I had a scholarship from the Ministry of Education to go and pursue my, let's say, bachelor degree. And at that time, biomedical sciences was available for me.
Nice. So you did my biomedical sciences in the UK?
In the UK, exactly.
That's like 4-5 years?
That was around 4 years.
4 years.
It was a 3-year bachelor degree, and I did a
Okay.
1-year master's degree
Oh.
as well.
You did your bachelor's in 3 years, and then a
Yes.
year of... Okay, I didn't do anything at school, I guess. From there, how do we get to Hong Kong?
Okay, we have to do a step
okay,
by
step by step.
Step by step.
Yeah.
So, being in the UK, and this is what I always tell people, was when I was doing my master's, I also took the time to do a bit of part-time work. So I worked everywhere. I worked in restaurants. I worked as a student liaison at the university to introduce new, let's say, students to the faculty and give them an orientation. So from a very, let's say, young age, I had that exposure to different people from different environments. And of course, being in an international university, you get to cross paths with everybody.
It's a melting pot.
From
That's
all
the
over
beauty
the
of
globe.
it, yeah.
But I would say, from that, let's say, perspective, I was able to meet people from East Asia, mainly from China, from Hong Kong, from Singapore, Malaysia, and that was the first introduction. That oh wow, these people are so interesting. I'd love to go and see that part of the world someday.
I see the hook there. Okay.
Exactly, and their food is delicious. So of course, getting to try their food and cuisine, that was the first entry or gateway into understanding the culture. When I graduated, it was 2008, so that was the financial crisis.
True.
And it was very difficult to find a job in the UK. So for me, I went back to Kuwait.
Okay.
And alhamdulillah, I managed to secure a job at the Desman Diabetes Institute, which is a clinical/research center, which also specializes in public health. So in that environment, that was also a good way to see the, I would always call it the multifaceted approach of health and disease. So you get to understand how, let's say, the clinics work with the doctors, with the nutritionists, and even with the public health policy advocates. So it's like a full circle of, let's say, exposures. And I think like being in that environment and seeing, oh, wow, you can actually do so much. And, you know, at that time, I had, you know, two objectives. I was like, I want to do my PhD, but I also want to gain more international experience. So it was very clear I'm not going to go back to the UK. I'm not going to go back to, let's say, European setting. I want to be able to learn something very different.
Okay.
And Eastern Asia, let's say, looking at, let's say, the rise of, you know, China, this was, you know, back in 2010. So in 2010, this was when, you know, we just had the Beijing Olympics, and we kind of saw China in this new light, invigorated, modern. And at the same time, we could see a lot of Chinese trade and cooperation. The same thing was happening with South Korea. We had the wave, we had channels like KBS World, Arirang being aired in Kuwait. So that was another exposure that, hey, the East is rising. There's something going on, something very exciting. And for me, I'm a very curious person by nature. So like just reading articles, reading reports, insight analysis, it was just very clear. Like, okay, I need to go there. I need to figure out a way. And, you know, I would say it's like, you know, strategically, step by step, I did manage to find that channel to get there through, let's say, academia, through studies. And that was like the beginning of the East Asian journey. And I always tell people I looked for the top universities in Asia Pacific, and they were Hong Kong University and the National University of Singapore. I applied to both, and Hong Kong approved first. So
you went with the first approval.
I went to Hong Kong.
But you did end up in Singapore. We'll get there.
Yes.
How was Hong Kong? I mean, we wouldn't ask you about UK because we all have our own ideas about the UK, but Hong Kong, culture shocks, anything. Tell me.
Food.
She says she loves the food, so.
I mean, it's weird because not a lot of people like Asian food, especially, you know, like China and those countries. They have different methods.
Just go for the stuff that you would eat from that culture. Forget the rest.
Lettuce.
Okay, this is what I always tell people about food. So the Asian food that you consume here and anywhere else in the world is nothing in comparison to
it's
what
modified to suit us, you know, here and then.
Yes, it is like localized. That's what we say, but it's not even localized. It's different. It's different because you have to look at the F&B sector. There are not trained chefs from China or East Asia that are producing the authentic cuisine. So then even to kind of adapt that taste takes time and takes more awareness. Even when you go to East Asia, there's like a variety. Like China, everyone thinks it's one type of cuisine. China is a continent.
Right.
Every single city has its own flavor and flair. So, you know, when you start to understand the complexity, it's very interesting. And for instance, their food has like a lot of principles towards health. So like people eat and they always consume food as medicine.
Right.
You know, from like soups to like teas to, you know, even the way that food is
They're
prepared.
very healthy. They take their health very seriously.
Exactly. They're all very slim.
True.
So yes, so I learned how to stay slim from like their lifestyle, their diets. But going back to your point on like how is Hong Kong? So and was it a culture shock?
Yeah.
I always tell people what's interesting for someone like me who was born in the UK, lived there for quite an extensive amount of time. I actually felt less of a culture shock in Hong Kong.
Wow.
And I'll tell you why. Like literally the first week that I arrived, I was like overwhelmed by the hospitality.
Yes, the Asians are known for that.
Exactly. So by the Hong Kong community, like literally my first week, I arrived in January, and they have the Chinese New Year during that period. So Chinese New Year is like our Eid. And literally, like, I was invited to all of my classmates' homes.
Oh.
These are people I've just met.
Right.
So they would invite me over. They're so sweet because they have the same custom where they give, like, money as a, like, you know,
oh, really?
like idea.
Really?
So and the thing is, they give it to everybody. So, like, if you're, like, an employee or a student,
you still receive it.
Your boss will give it to you. So your seniors will give you.
You guys gotta, you know, anyway.
We'll give you idea, and they called there like a red pocket. So it's a red pocket of money. So that was really interesting to see those similarities
yeah.
with the culture, the hospitality, and like everybody felt like, okay, you're new, we're gonna show you around, we're gonna take care of you.
That's good.
So that was like.
So they're very welcoming. You didn't feel like you were alienated by anyone. That's good.
No.
Yeah.
And of course, like Hong Kong is a very, let's say, historical city. It was a former British colony, which was returned to the Chinese in 1997. But at the same time, it has that fusion of Chinese, European values, customs.
So I'm guessing Hong Kong doesn't have a big of a language barrier as China does.
Exactly. So there you can just,
You
speak
can speak English.
Yes.
Okay. Because I feel like in China it would have an issue with the language barrier.
Yes and no. So,
Okay.
so what I always tell people, what's interesting, that I visited China for the first time in 2012. Like, I
Nice.
think a few months after I settled in Hong Kong.
Was it different than Hong Kong?
It is different.
Okay.
It's so like I'll tell people it has like more of an authenticity in a way. And what's interesting is even back in during those times, they were all very, let's say, tech savvy. So I remember the first time that I landed, of course, I didn't speak any Chinese. People would come up to me and they'd put their phone in my face. And I was confused. I was like, what do you want me to do? And then they would talk in Chinese.
Yeah, I've seen
They
those
wanna use
videos.
the-
Like,
It would
yeah,
translate
yeah,
in English, and they'll tell me, okay, you talk. And then I'll
they're
know.
being thoughtful, using
Yeah.
their own device to just have a conversation with
Exactly.
you. That's
Exactly.
good.
Yeah.
That's good.
And then they'll tell you, oh, download this app. We'll
They'll
do
help
sign
you.
language,
Yeah.
and then that's the way to get by. So, from a very like literally from the start, like everybody just wants to be accommodating, wants to make sure that you can get by and show you around.
That's wonderful.
You've been exposed to so many cultures. You basically lived most of your life abroad. How does that affect you as a person? I mean, your mindset and everything else.
That's a good question. I think, of course, there's two sides to it. One way you feel, let's say, honored to belong to the broader, let's say, global citizen, like category. But at the same time, it also keeps you very grounded to your own identity, because you want to make sure that you're always projecting the best of your culture to other people. So what I often tell people, and then they always tease me, so like when I'm in Kuwait, everyone calls me the Chinese ambassador. Because I'm always telling good things about Hong Kong and about China. And when I'm in Hong Kong or in Singapore, everyone's like, oh, you're the Kuwaiti ambassador, because you're always saying nice things about Kuwait and educating us about the culture. So I feel it's very important that when we're put in these situations, we have to like do our very best to educate. And of course, like not educate forcefully, but like just show by example. Show by example how you behave, your openness towards new cultures, your understanding, your curiosity. Of course, not everyone is going to think the same way that you do, or let's say have the same ideals or principles. But I think always being open-minded is important.
And it's a cultural exchange,
Exactly.
It's getting someone's point of view from that part of the world on a certain topic. Even if you disagree, it's good to hear that opinion.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Your journey doesn't stop here. Next stop, I believe, is Singapore.
Next stop is Singapore. So,
but hold on. sorry.
No
Next stop is Singapore, but we'll take a break and we'll continue. Back on the Untold, continuing our conversation. We left off with your journey from Hong Kong. You graduated, right? And how did Singapore? I know you applied to Singapore before. Was that the reason you wanted to? Was it your PhD? No, it's not. I'm lost. What did you study in Singapore?
Okay. All right. Well, again, let's rewind.
Yes.
So in Hong Kong, I went there to do my PhD in food science and biotechnology.
Okay, right.
And the mindset that I had at the time was, okay, I love this field. It's very interesting, and I wanted to even get into a sector called like food law, which is
food law.
Exactly. So food law is being able to like write policies and guidelines towards like health. Let's say we call it functional food and health labels for food. So similar to how you have pharmaceuticals, there's another category how you can make food classified as healthy, and also certain food ingredients you can classify them as having health benefits.
I guess that's what the FDA does, right?
Yes, that's one of the
Right,
regulating
okay, that's
bodies,
one of the
absolutely.
okay, I see.
So that was like, you know, the path I was going on in Hong
mm.
Kong in terms of my studies and like the environment I was in. But again, there was another disruption, right? So like I graduated, I was in Hong Kong. Hong Kong
How
is
many years did you spend in Hong Kong? Sorry.
so at that time. So I spent in total almost 10 years in Hong
10
Kong.
years in Hong
10
Kong
years.
to
That's a long
pursue a
time.
PhD?
5 years for my PhD.
5 years for
But
a
was it back
PhD.
and forth, or you just?
No, this was a full degree.
Full
Full degree.
Wow.
So usually with PhD degrees, like you'll complete all of your research work, you'll do your write-up,
Right.
and then you have to wait for your exam. So I literally waited for like almost a year to get
I see.
examined because they have to invite external examiners, and then you have to do corrections on, let's say, their feedback and inputs, and then you submit, and then you're officially titled.
That's a
So-
process.
It was a very excruciating long process.
I
I know
guess-
many times I was, you know, close to the edge of like I need to just quit and go back to the working sector. And I'm, you know, I'm always grateful to have very supportive family that just kept pushing me and encouraging me to
Right.
continue.
So I guess I got confused with Singapore because you finished your studies in Hong Kong.
I finished my
Did you go to Singapore to work?
Okay,
Okay.
so then I was in Hong Kong. What's interesting about the Hong Kong system, and this is where I encourage a lot of people to consider alternatives to, you know, academia from Europe and the U.S.
Right.
Is anyone who studies in Hong Kong, be it a master's degree for 1 year or a 5-year PhD program, the Hong Kong government gives you automatically a 2-year working visa to remain
Oh.
within the country. So they act
That's
as your
nice.
sponsors to remain within the country.
Okay.
So I was under, like, you know, I was given that opportunity. So I thought, okay, this is great. Let me get work experience in Hong Kong before I come back to Kuwait. And there, what was interesting was, even though I had a work visa, you know, I was looking very hard to find a job in food
In Hong Kong.
in Hong Kong.
Okay.
But because Hong Kong, the nature of the city is it's a financial hub. You know, it's like one of
Right,
the biggest
right.
financial centers, similar to New York and London and Tokyo. So I always make the joke it was easier to find a job in finance rather than food.
Probably.
So this is kind of the start towards my career in investments and finance. So, you know, I lived in Hong Kong for 5 years, right? And I was a kind of an active student. I had a lot of, let's say, networks of friends. I joined a lot of clubs, communities. And, you know, one of my good friends at the time, she was, you know, working at Bloomberg. Her name is Lynn Robson. And she was in the tech sector.
Nice.
And she, at that time, she had set up her own private consultancy, rather M&A boutique, like a merger acquisition boutique. And she was so sweet. She just came up to me. She's like, you just graduated. You have nothing better to do. You should come and help me in my company.
Okay,
That
that's a
was
job.
very-
That's a job offering right there.
And that's a job. So I was like, okay, but I don't know anything about finance. Are you sure you want to, you know, recruit me to your company? And she said, yeah, no problem. I'll teach you everything. And I worked with her for a year in Hong Kong. And through that experience, what's interesting is I got that exposure to, you know, working with different kinds of technology startups, especially in the medical technology field. And through that, I was able to meet the investor-related network and also apply my, let's say, technical side because I was working as a scientific advisor. So,
Oh, okay.
so as a scientific advisor for investments and startups in the medical technology field.
That's a lot of money there, I would say. It's a lot of money there.
A lot of money there. And what I always tell people was I was doing the right thing, like at the right time, at the right place.
You sure did. You
Because
sure did.
food technology at that time was very new. There were very few people who understood what, let's say, food technology innovations were and could decipher it. And there were very few investors working in this space as well. So this was now like I would call it, you know, this was like, 2018.
Okay.
So in 2018, there were people talking in Hong Kong that we need to start focusing on food technology investments.
Okay.
And I was lucky enough to have met, you know, people who were kickstarting a lot of, you know, initiatives, accelerators and incubators around this space. So together, I worked with a company called Brink in Hong Kong, and we established the first food technology accelerator in Hong Kong.
So that was a very long journey. I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure you had a lot of difficulties. What would you say are the major difficulties that you faced, you know, traveling from one country to another, and then getting, you know, the first job and the entire, I mean, that's I'm quiet most of the interview because your story is quite incredible. So let's talk about the, the
Challenges.
difficulties and the challenges.
I feel like you had a perfect time.
No,
Nobody really has a perfect
No
time.
one has a perfect time. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. It's there's a lot of like ups and downs.
Right.
I mean, what I often say is, okay, when you're moving to a new place, you need to give yourself at least 6 months to adjust.
6 months.
This is me. Like I usually need 6
Long
months.
period.
And I'm okay. No, it's okay. It's okay. But the point is, when you give yourself 6 months, you have the time to settle in. So that's everything from opening a bank account, getting your accommodation, getting all your ID, your papers, getting the routine. Meeting people, but not just any people, but also meeting people that you want to form long relationships and like meaningful relationships with within that country. So 6 months is like the right time, because it's always daunting when you move to a new place for the first time, especially with nobody, no reference, no contacts. So that's always the, at least that for me, that was the lesson learned, that like 6 months, be patient, it's going to happen. In terms of like, career, it's the same thing. I always say there were a lot of pivots in my career. There were many things I wanted to do initially, but they never, let's say, came to fruition. But at the end of the day, like other things presented themselves. And by taking up the advantage of those opportunities really helped me to see that actually the alternative was better. What I initially wanted to do might have not been the best thing. So, I think what people need to like realize is just be open-minded and just be patient. Like things will come. And I think, when I was younger, I was just very impatient, impulsive. I want things to go a certain way. I want to do this. I want to do that. And I think that was the major struggle, right? Like not waiting or trying to explore all of the options that are available towards you.
Okay, can you tell us about your work at APAC? Am I saying it right? APAC, what is it?
Okay, I'll explain what that is. Yeah. Okay, so I always tell people like it's about regions. So like the region that I was based in, Hong Kong and Singapore, is Asia Pacific. So Asia Pacific comprises of Northeast Asia, let's say the China, Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia, which is like Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, and many others, and then the Pacific, which is Australia and New Zealand. So that whole territory is called Asia Pacific. So typically when people ask me, where are you based? I'll say I'm based in Asia Pacific. That's the territory that I'm like working around. Now, similarly to my work now, I'm doing the same thing, but for the GCC. So everybody like in the Asia Pacific region says MENA. I work in the Middle East, North Africa. Yeah. But I always tell them, okay, but you need to be very clear and segment it, because I need to understand the market demographic. I need to understand the cultural reference. So, it's about educating that there are territories within each, let's say, region. Right. And that's really the work that I do. So I work now as a consultant, an agri-food, agribusiness consultant, which means I focus on agricultural and food solutions that will help food security in both regions. So helping to bridge the technology transfer between Asia Pacific and the GCC, helping companies expand into both regions as a commercial enterprise, and supporting cultural projects so that people can understand the cultural nuances in the Asia Pacific region as well as the GCC.
That's
incredible.
Incredible, I mean, yeah. I wanted to ask, looking ahead, what emerging trends do you anticipate in the fields you specialize in, and how do you see them shaping the future of food sciences and biotechnology?
Oh my goodness, we can talk about this for like 3 hours.
Just let's talk about it like, in a short.
Yeah, in your best way.
Okay, I'll try to.
In your best way.
I'll try to pick one example, because then at least like we'll wrap up quickly.
Yeah.
So some of the groundbreaking work I was involved in was what we classify as cellular agriculture.
Cellular.
So cellular agriculture is what you might know as lab-grown meat.
Oh, yeah, that's the next big thing.
Exactly.
So it's the DNA of, let's say, a cow, and they make the meat from the DNA.
Yeah.
So it still tastes like meat, yeah. Still tastes like meat, everything. I can't tell the difference, basically, right? To that point?
That's the idea.
That's the idea.
That's the promise. So the promise is, like you said, they will isolate cells, like stem cells from an animal, from either animal tissue, a biopsy, or from a stem cell, or like an embryonic stem cell. They'll then grow it, let it, let's say, mature into muscle tissue.
Right.
That's what we're familiar with eating. And then you would consume a piece of an animal rather than the whole animal.
And at what stage are we at right now? Do we have the product in stores yet?
Okay, great
And
question.
are people going to be open to this?
It's a huge topic,
Yeah,
I'm
it
telling
is a
you.
huge topic.
But this is like one example. So
But this only solves the whole humane thing and not killing animals, right?
yeah. So
It solves that.
there's many, let's
Okay.
say, reasons why people would
And the
pursue this
cost,
type
of
of
course, of
technology.
agriculture and all that.
That's the thing. So like there is of course the humane aspect, so animal ethics
Animal ethics,
towards let's say raising animals and how you slaughter them. There's also the health concerns. So for instance, with animals, you have let's say the crossover of viruses.
Right. You can eliminate those.
Like avian flu, or even like we had the mad cow disease outbreak like years back. So that will be another way to kind of solve that. The other thing is, for instance, countries like Kuwait, where we don't have what we call it like land for agriculture.
Okay.
So we need to have a way to produce our own protein. Maybe we can do it in a lab rather than having a field of cows and sheep and like needing all of the infrastructure available. It's currently being sold.
It is being sold?
In Singapore and the U.S. So these are the two. Singapore was the first country in the world to approve lab-grown meat. The U.S. was the second, which was approved this year.
Could you tell me about cost?
It's still very expensive.
It is more expensive than
it's still,
traditional.
Yes, it's very expensive.
Huh.
And I think not everyone's going to be open to this. Like,
Yes.
it's especially you're in the Gulf and people like they like to,
They like
slaughter
slaughtering people,
animals for occasions. I'm not going to say slaughter. Come on. We like to
it is
have
what it
fresh meat.
Yeah.
But anyway, what kind of advice would you like to give to the viewers in general?
I mean, like, based on my story, I think what I want the viewers to take away and be inspired by is, if you're after something, trying something new, or let's say exploring a new territory, something that, is not the regular or routine thing to do after like either through pursuing your degree or even working. You should go for it because there are so many opportunities in this world at this stage. I would say that many countries are quite progressive in terms of their immigration laws for students, also to grant work visas. There's so much groundbreaking work happening across all sectors. And I was thinking about this before this interview. A country I've always wanted to go to is Costa Rica.
Costa Rica. Why?
And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
So Costa Rica is, making headlines with regards to their sustainability policies and regenerative agriculture, let's say, methodologies. So it's becoming this hub spot for like a lot of the environmental sustainability change, also using renewable energy to kind of fuel the society. So, somebody who's interested in that field, like, why would you go to the US or go to Europe? You should go to Costa Rica where they're pioneers.
Interesting.
So I think that's what I want people to take away. Similar to, let's say South Korea as an example. Like they're pioneering in arts and entertainment and digital arts. So like instead of just thinking about North America and Hollywood, why don't you explore South Korea and see some of the emerging, growing, let's say Eastern Asian film and media markets. Right. So, I think people should just expand their horizons. Like think about what else you can do. And, when there's a will, there's always a way.
All right.
Beautiful.
That was
That's
amazing.
amazing.
Having you was amazing. You are
Time
quite
flew
an
by,
impressive
yeah.
person.
Very, very impressive.
I would say you were adventurous as well. I mean, living abroad is not an easy thing, especially as a girl. So thank you for being here with us again, and hopefully we'll see you again. This is definitely not going to be the last time.
It was not
With a
enough
person like you,
time to-
there's never a last time. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for your time again, and we'll be back for the wrap-up. What an episode. I learned a lot today.
A lot.
And I'm more interested into that
I was very
lab-grown
quiet
meat.
today.
You were, because you were just listening, because it's so much. The journey she had is beautiful.
And she is very talkative.
Yes.
Which is amazing.
Yes.
She knows exactly what she wants to say.
Very knowledgeable.
And knowledgeable.
On the point,
And, educated, smart.
Yes.
She's...
I'm very interested in this lab-grown meat. It's been a huge thing. I've read about it back in the U.S. And it's the next thing.
What do you mean lab grown? Like...
Again.
No, I'm not up for that.
We'll debate.
I would love my regular steak cut from a normal animal.
It'll taste the same.
That was raised in a beautiful farm or in the desert.
All right.
I'm a
That's
traditional
all.
Arab.
Okay.
Anyway.
She is in a traditional Arab. All right. That is all the time we have for tonight's episode of The Untold. Thank you for tuning in, and tune in next time for a brand new episode with another guest. Thank
Good
you
night.
and good night.